Oh, actually, I have responsibility for the pulpit next week. So actually, I'm kind of happy today to kind of give a little bit of an introduction to where I think we are going to go next week and pick up a little bit today. As we come to the Lord's table, I just love seeing the table again like this, and I love coming for worship to the table. How many of you enjoy doing that? Isn't it? It makes such a difference. It makes such a difference. It makes such a difference. It does. So, as we do come to the Lord's table, part of the reasons I wanted to get up here was because I really want to do more talking to you than preaching at you. I don't know what's the difference, so whatever, you let me know. But I told James I wanted to follow him. And if you remember, those of you that were here last week, Pastor James talked about waking up from sleep. And, it's an admonition that's all through the scriptures. But it's particularly relevant to us today in the church right now and in the day we're living in. And so I was thinking about that, Pastor James, and I was thinking, let's go back to that night that this table was instituted. I don't think you could get a more bunch of more sleeping people than that group that got around that table. They had no idea of the magnitude of the day they were living in, did they? They had no idea of the magnitude of what was happening at that table that night. And think about it. Now, these are good Jewish boys. So this is kind of like, could you say that maybe it was like a tradition to them too? I mean, they were kind of used to doing this. It was Passover, and they're celebrating the Passover, right? So it was kind of tradition. But something was in the air. Because Jesus' popularity was over. Many people define this period now as his unpopular days. Just wondering if that connects with anybody, if it sounds a little familiar. His popularity was over. People were scurrying. The crowd was getting smaller. The religious people were getting angrier. And so here they sat. Now, interesting, let's remember that the Passover, remember that they were coming for the Passover. They don't know that they're coming for the beginning of a whole new, they're in a transition and don't even know it, right? And so this table is about a transition when the Hebrew people and the Israelites didn't really understand the magnitude of what they were living through. Remember, it was Moses went to Pharaoh, God said, let my people go, remember? And so they took a lamb for a family, a lamb for a house, and they went into that house and they ate that lamb. And it changed everything. Because this table was a transition. Then the Passover table was a transition, and it's a transition. It was a transition for these guys too. So what happened? The first transition with Passover, they were eating the lamb, and their whole entire identity was changed at that meal. They ceased from that moment on to be slaves and became free sons of God. Just wondering if this is clicking anything for anybody. So here we are again in this transition. See, they had to eat the lamb in the first in Passover, right? Well, this is what they were doing in the Last Supper. This is what we do every time. Every time we come together around the table. But what does it mean to eat the lamb? We're going to talk about that. I just want to ask you a question, though. do you think that, how do I put it? Well, let's go back a second. Let's go back to Genesis. Sorry, but we always have to come back here. And back to Genesis, we see God's mission plan. And what's God's mission? What's God's mission? Where is he going with all this? You know, we sang about how he's forgiven us, and we're all grateful, but where is he going with this? Well, just go back to Genesis 1:26. Let us make man in our image and in our likeness. You can close your Bible after that, because the rest of the Bible is the whole battle to get back to Genesis 1:26. And listen, I say this with absolute respect, and don't go out here and misquote me now. But in some ways, the cross was an interruption. The cross was God having to intervene, to turn things around, to get back up to the place where he was going, which was to get sons and daughters just like his first son. The cross was a kind of a necessary interruption. But I don't know if anybody was here when I spoke the last time I did, but I said that I believe we're living in a day that's a transition as well. And we're leaving a thing called churchianity, and we're moving into Christ himself. And I believe that's exactly what is happening right now. And so you see, first of all, you know, we're going to have to even define what does that look like, and how. We have to go back to the mission statement. Where's he going? Where's he going? He's going right back where he's always started, where he's intended to go. Let me tell you, nothing will stop him from getting there. Nothing. And all we see is setbacks, people. You know, people are people, right? And the children of Israel, and it's one setback after another, and they're disobedient, and God has to raise up a prophet, and then they fall back again, and he's got to raise somebody else up. And I mean, it's just a story over and over again of this incredible God who'll never give up, who has an eternal purpose in his heart that nothing is ever going to change. But I think that the best thing, I think that the devil, one thing you cannot call the devil is stupid. And the best thing the devil has ever engineered is religion. That's his specialty. I mean, gosh, you can be with people that are religious, and they're some of the meanest people you'll ever meet. Religious people are mean, self-centered, self-righteous people. And so I think that in the next few, today, I want to intro, and then next week I want to talk more about it. I want to talk about what is this thing that is churchianity? What does it look like? And where are we? And what does it mean to exchange it for Christ? Oh gosh, we're talking about two different worlds. We're talking about, can I tell you something? Can I tell you? The Christian life is absolutely and completely supernatural. You can no more live the Christian life than you can expect your dog or your cat to sit at your table and live with you and be a human being. He can't. He's from another plane of nature. And there's no way that humans can live the Christian life on their own, on their own self-effort. You know, it's kind of like you ask somebody to hold up a heavy book. You're holding up a heavy book, and at first, by self-effort, you know it's easy. But then you encounter a law, and this law is gravity. And you can have the best intentions. I just want to hold up this book. It just so matters to me. It's so important to me. You could do everything in your power. You can want it so badly. But a law is taking over. And eventually, you can't stand up against a law. And that's what it's like to try to serve Jesus and live with Jesus out of your own self-effort. Which is the Christianity, quote, churchianity that you and I have been exposed to. Let me read you a sentence. I don't know. Some things I write, and I just want to read them because I'm never going to say them as well. You see, Jesus said, that we would know him. You see, the Christian life is about knowing Jesus. Listen to this. And this is eternal life, that I may know him. This is to know God in an experiential way of life. It's more than believing and trusting in an objective God and receiving his gifts and his power for our use or our strength, of course. Instead, it's to possess, experience, and enjoy the subjective God within our being. As long as we can make God out there somewhere, and then we're doing all these things to please him and work for him and do the right things, you see, that's called religion. That's called religion. And you know why you have so many burned out Christians who are sitting in churches all over the country today, bored, discouraged, as critical and complaining and angry as anybody else in the bowling alleys or bars and there's a real good reason for it. Because we haven't experienced true Christianity yet, mostly. Now, I'm not talking to anybody in here, and I'm not mad at anybody. I can't help it. It's just the way it comes out. I'm talking to the church, okay? I'm just talking to the church and to myself. But brothers and sisters, we have to understand that we have made this such a we have brought this has been brought down to such a human level, such a I don't know what else to say, such a human level. And that's why people are discouraged. Listen, if you don't know him, you'll wind up serving him. You'll just wind up serving him. He's not looking for that. Do you know how many burned out servants there are? Because they may have known him in ministry, but they never knew him in their heart every day, another life inside of them. Brothers and sisters, listen to me. This whole issue of I want to call Christianity, this life that we're called into, that's exactly what I want to say. You see, there's two lives in the Bible. It's Adam's life through Adam. All were made sinners. You see, you got into sinning because you were born into sinning. You didn't become a sinner because you sinned. You sinned because you're a sinner. You were born a sinner. Adam, because Adam fell in that garden, we are born sinners. It's something fundamental happened at a fundamental level within me. And so that's why I will to be humble. You know, I want to be gracious, and I'm putting a smile on my face, but deep down inside, I don't feel gracious. And deep down inside, I don't feel humble. And deep down inside, I want to love God, but deep down inside, I really don't. I'm trying to. Now, if you don't relate to any of that, we'll dissect you, find out what's inside. Because that is. God doesn't care what you were born like on your first birth. You may be a really nice person, but I've got news for us. You know, the veil that was torn into when Jesus died, from the top to the bottom, supernaturally, God himself ripped the veil in the Holy of Holies where the presence of God was, and it was ripped in half by God himself. You know what was on that veil? The cherubim. It was pictures of all creation. It was an ox and a man and ox and a man and an eagle, and because what it was saying is this. What it was saying is this creation and everything that's born into this life is over as far as God is concerned. No matter how nice it looks, No matter how it dresses up, it's over. You came into this first life by your birth. You got to get out by your death. There's only one way out. You gotta die. You got to somehow get out of that first life and get into that second life. And then you got to learn to live by that life. You got to learn to live by. See, it's not just, well, he used me. Oh, he used me, and I laid hands on somebody, and they got healed. Oh, I spoke in tongues. It's about learning to live. You cannot please the flesh, cannot please God. So Jesus, from John 13 to 17, tells us the phenomenal transition that's taking place. And when you look at the group of guys that were around this table, I want to ask you something. Do you think God wanted to populate heaven with those guys? Do you think he wanted to populate heaven with those guys? Peter denied him. John almost ran out of his clothes to get away during the crucifixion. Only a handful of women were there at the bottom of the cross. Yay for women. Do you think he wanted to populate heaven with that group? Forgiveness was an interruption. Forgiveness, he needed to intervene. Jesus had to come and get us back on track. A man lost the way, the first Adam. He needed a second man to get us back on track. The last man. Second man, last Adam. Last Adam, second man. He needed a second man to get this thing back on the road. What was the road? Where was he going? He's going back to his eternal purpose. Man in his image and in his likeness, exactly like him, living out of his life all the time. And we need to talk about how do you tap that life? Because the church doesn't even, we think it's just as long as we're doing good things. Listen, that's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God's not interested in how good I am. He's interested in, Linda, what life are you living from? Are you living from? Because it's the source of what you do, not just what you do. Who is the source behind that? Young people, I just love seeing these guys here. Whose birthday? Happy birthday. How old are you? 17. Who remembers being 17? Liar. You know why I picked you two out? Because this is what I believe. I believe if young people like these men get a hold of the real gospel and the incredible adventure that real Christianity is, they'll be just like John and James, and they will leave everything. Because it's not going to be churchianity that's going to attract these guys. And Jesus says to each of you, follow me. Don't follow a church, per se. Don't follow a dogma, per se. He asked us to follow him, brothers and sisters. Follow him. This is about what life you're living in.